I'm at the Port of Montreal where almost nothing is happening today, Andrew. In fact, there are 2 ships that are docked waiting here to be unloaded, but that obviously is unable to happen. 1,200 dock workers are being locked out for the very first day. It comes after its members voted 99.7% to reject the employer's final offer. It included a 20% wage increase over 6 years. The Port of Montreal CEO, Julie Gascon, spoke to reporters this morning. She said the shutdown is catastrophic and could result in hundreds of millions of dollars in losses. A reminder that the port moves almost $400 million worth of goods per day.
That's CTV reporter Olivia O'Malley. She was on with Andrew Carter this morning talking about what is now a lockout at the Port of Montreal. And she mentioned Julie Gascon, who's president and CEO of the Montreal Port Authority, who is on the line with us. Thank you for being here. Look, it's tough, obviously, across the board here. Number one, to hear how much money goes through this port, $400 million annually. But then I'm trying to understand, because as I looked at this and I heard she said 97.7% of members here voted against this deal. That's not as if we're close to anything here. So what are you hoping happens next?
So hi, Aaron. Thank you so much for having me at your show. So first of all, the Port of Montreal is not the employer of the stevedores or dock workers working at the Port of Montreal. The employer is the Maritime Employer Association, and they are the one negotiating with the stevedores. The Port of Montreal manages the Port of Montreal, so just as a point of clarity.
Okay, so I understand that now. I wonder, though, you're kind of stuck in the middle, right? You're running the port. You have 2 sides very much opposed to each other in terms of what this offer is going to look like. So, what can you do? Is there anything you can do other than wait? Or are you asking for, is it upon you to ask for the labor minister to intervene, or that's up to them?
Thank you, Aaron. It's been over a year that this process has been ongoing and those negotiations have been ongoing. And the absence of a resolution to get to a collective agreement, a signed collective agreement, is really impacting the reputation and the entire logistics chain of Montreal and Canada. I can't comment, Aaron, on the strategies between the 2 parties. This is really up to them in terms of how they are managing this. But what I know is that it is impacting all of the businesses that depend on the Port of Montreal. And the Port of Montreal don't have control over those decisions. And the federal government is the one sitting at the table through their mediation, federal mediator, that are supporting both parties trying to come to term. And I am sure that from their perspective, they will take actions as they see suitable to manage this conflict. But I couldn't tell you from one way or another. They're the one that have the details, and they are elbow deep in this.
Do you know, was there a meeting, in fact, that already happened just a day or so ago? Do you know?
So my understanding is that there are attempts to have meeting, but I do not have the details. Again, this really is with the federal mediation group that could answer those questions. So
let me ask, with respect to the port itself, when you hear that there are 1,200 people not working, you wonder what is going to happen? Is everything shut down? What does get to go through?
So, like you said, Aaron, every day at the Port of Montreal, there's over $400 million of merchandise that transit through the port, in and out, export and import. That creates $268 million in economic activities. So in addition to the 1,200 stevedores that are not working at this time because of the lockout, there are 10,000 workers that depends on the activity of the port. So let me name you a few, like all the truckers,
right.
The pilots, all of the ones that are supplying the supports to the vessel, all of the railroad workers. Everyone depends on those jobs to keep the economy going, and those ones are like it's at a ground stop. There is some essential services going on, as you know. Bulk grain is an essential service, and also the cargo going to Newfoundland, as Montreal handles quite a large volume of the cargo moving through to Newfoundland.
So some that will continue despite the lockout, those services?
Yes, those have been deemed essential services, yes.
So, it's interesting because I understand now, as I said, you're not the one negotiating, you're just the one responsible for the port. You have 2 sides basically fighting against each other. I wonder, though, and I'm not going to ask you necessarily for an opinion because it's not fair, But I'm looking here at what they're being offered, which is 3.5% or at least 3% salary increase every year for 4 years, 3.5% increase for the 2 subsequent years. That's 19% over the next 6 years. And they're holding out, if I read this right, for 20 because that's what they got in Vancouver. Is that accurate?
I can't comment on what's being proposed. It would be really out of place for me. That negotiation is really between the employers and the employees.
Okay. Spoken like a true person sitting in the middle. I understand it's not an easy position to be in. Can I ask you if you're optimistic?
Listen, I just want to get the port back to work. It's so important. You have to understand, Montreal is the second largest port in Canada. But not only that, Montreal sits at the cornerstone of the third largest economy in the world. When you look at the Canadian population, 65% of the Canadian population is in Quebec and Ontario. So Montreal handles that cargo for 65% of the population. And the other piece that's so important is that you have 75% of the manufacturing capacity of Canada sits within range of the Port of Montreal. So the Port of Montreal is a critical infrastructure in that respect. We're also unique, Aaron, because at the Port of Montreal, it's the only place in the East Coast, in North America, East Coast, that it's a destination port. What it means is when the vessel comes in, it fully unloads and it fully reloads. So we have a balanced export and import. So, for example, right now, Halifax and St. John are helping out, but it's just not sustainable because their business model is quite different. So what happens is that the cargo is going south. So it's going to our competitor, which is New York, Norfolk, and Savannah. Mm-hmm. And when the shipping lines are making those decisions, it's a tremendous uplift for shipping lines to make those decisions. And over the last year, I would say since the beginning of 2024, let's say you take from 2022 to 2024, overall our volume has reduced by 24% as those negotiations are creating so much uncertainty that people are making plans with alternatives. So shipping lines are looking for 3 things, Aaron. They want to have capacity. They don't want to have a port that's congested. And when they're coming in, they want to make sure that they're going to be loaded, they're going to be unloaded and reloaded as quickly as possible. And if you don't have these 3 ingredients, you're not in the game. And so that's what happened. If everything moves south, it's the economic sovereignty of the country that's at play. And that's why I'm doing those interviews today, because once you don't control the commodities coming in and out of your country, how can you claim economic sovereignty at that time? We need to get back to work.
Wow. You sound like you're quite worried, and obviously with reason. I had no idea that number you just said. What are we down from 2022 to 2024? More than 20%?
More than, 24% at the Port of Montreal. And just a quick fact for you is that during the summer, if you take just the summer months, like going into the fall, that small period, we were down a percentage, like 2 or 5, something like that. But the Port of New York was up 18%. So it shows you how much is now trying to migrate south. And that makes it very, very complicated for Canadian businesses trying to export, for example, overseas or trying to import from overseas.
Okay. Well, listen, I'm sure we're all hopeful. That's not the kind of thing you want to hear and realize it damages Montreal's reputation the longer this goes on. So let's hope the federal government gets involved and finally brings this to a conclusion, because this is very, very troubling news, to say the least. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you, Aaron. A pleasure.
Julie Gascon, President and CEO of the Montreal Port Authority, stuck in the middle, just hoping this will come to an end. But as I said, when you look at the numbers, I wish we could have someone from the union come on, but consider they're being offered 19%, right, over 6 years, which would bring, and that's what it says in the article here, if they were to accept this deal, it would bring a salary, average compensation at the Port of Montreal to the people working, to the longshoremen, to more than $200,000 per year by the end of the contract, so 6 years from now. That's what they're looking at.